Good evening. Today is Monday, April 9th, 2018, and this is the Cabarrus County Board of Education work session and public hearing on the budget for the fiscal year 2018-2019. I'll call this meeting to order. And the first item is to have a moment of silence for Mr. Rex G. Klein, a CCS substitute bus driver who passed away on February 21st. Please join me. Thank you. Board, I'll take a motion to adopt the agenda for tonight's work session.
So move.
Second.
So Dr. Kirk made the motion and Mr. Walter made the second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. The first item we have is our public hearing for the Cabarrus County Schools budget for fiscal year 2018-2019. I'll take a motion that the public hearing be open for public input.
So moved. Seconded.
So Mr. Harrison made the motion, Mr. Shoemaker seconded that. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So we have 3 people signed up for speaking tonight. 2 of the names who signed up tonight previously signed up, so we're going to start with those who signed up before the meeting. So the first person is Kenya McGriff. Welcome. You'll have 3 minutes to address the board. Now, if you've spoken to us before, but if you would be at the podium and you need to push the button to light up the mic. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, my name is Kenya McGriff, and our daughter Kalia Hill was presented with racism and hatred at Central Cabarrus High School on March 15, 2018. We have sent an email to the board members, superintendents, teachers, and principal on March the 21st in reference to this matter. We have not heard any response back from board members on addressing this issue about getting a cultural competency class with refresher courses for staff and students. The course will help the staff and students due to the racism and hatred issues that has been going on at the school for years. It is to the point that the teachers or staff does not know how to respond to the students when a student of the opposite race says or does something derogatory. For instance, our daughter, who is a Black American student, was told to go back to her country by a white American student. The white student was not addressed, but our daughter was addressed by the white teacher by calling Kalia disrespectful when she responded back to the white student. When we addressed the teacher of why she didn't address the white student before it escalated, the teacher said to us that she didn't know what to say to the white student. The teacher stated to us that this is probably a learned behavior from his parents, but the teacher found words to say something to our daughter when she responded to his ignorance. We believe if the staff and students would have the proper diverse training, then this and many other issues that has been going on could have been avoided. We would also like to have the school renovated due to the racist logos on the walls, along with the mice and bug infestation at Central Cabarrus High School. The football field is nice, but the inside of the school is not clean. Cabarrus County is building a new high school, putting money to that school. Why not finance Central Cabarrus with these renovations? You can't erase a scar with just a bandage. We the people put you in office to help the students. Please find in a budget to address these issues.
Okay, thank you. The next speaker is Al McGriff.
Hello, I'm Al McGriff.
Hello.
My wife basically hit most of the points that we wanted to speak about. But we just hope that you can find a way to put this in your budget, so that these issues wouldn't be issues, okay? That's all.
Okay, thank you, sir. And the next speaker is Mike Watson.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Mike Watson. I'm the regional manager of China Construction and wanted to discuss, and don't know if this is the right time, the Southwest Elementary School.
That's really not our fiscal year 2018-19 budget.
It's on the agenda tonight, correct?
It is, but this specific public hearing is for the 2018-19 budget. So there's,
Can I
Another
ask him when the appropriate time would be to discuss that?
you can certainly send staff a communication if you have questions.
I did. I sent Mr. Cone a communication along with the architects. We were the apparent low bidders on the project. The project, from what I understand, is over budget.
Okay, sir, I'm going to have to stop you because this would set a precedent that we don't normally have contract bidders come and discuss. Mr. Shaw, how would you suggest he express his concerns?
Well, I do think.
Would you hit your button there, please?
See if I can get that working. Hope this works.
Sure.
The comments for tonight are for the public budget, hearing on the public budget. There is a meeting next week, which is the regular board meeting of the month. It's a public comment section. So that would be one possibility. Although usually we have people who have concerns about the bidding process to contact administrators. If there's a concern, the letter to the board could be shared. I would certainly review that if it went past the administration. There's also a possibility of speaking at the meeting next Monday.
Okay. We just noticed on the agenda tonight it was going to be discussed and that another contractor was going to be selected or a notice of intent was going to be given to them.
Right, and we will not be voting on that tonight. We'll discuss it, receive information from staff, and next week we'll vote.
Okay.
So-
So the appropriate time to speak would be next week or?
Yeah, what I
I
would
would
recommend is speaking with staff, sending correspondence to staff. If there's concern about that, you could forward that correspondence to the chair, and the
Okay.
chair will certainly forward it to me. We make sure that all those matters are taken into account, certainly.
Okay, well, I know twice I've already sent emails and haven't gotten response back. I've talked to the architect 3 times, but that's as far as I've gotten. And all I wanted is a chance to figure out why the selection was chosen
Okay.
like it was when supposedly the project was over budget and you didn't
Okay.
choose a
Well,
deductive
we really need
change
to stop because we don't want to set a precedent of, I'll say, every unhappy bidder possibly, coming to the board. So if you would send your email, you can send it to myself and Mr. Shaw, or I will forward it to him for consideration, and then he can advise the board on,
order. Sure, I will do that.
okay, thank
Thank
you,
you.
sir.
Thank you.
Will all of us receive that email as well?
Yes, whatever, yeah, I'll send it on to you. Okay, those were the only speakers that were signed up tonight. So I will take a motion to close the public hearing on the budget for fiscal year 18-19.
So moved.
Was that David? David and Robert? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Okay, the first item we have under reports section is from Ms. Klutz regarding more budget topics.
Thank you. So this afternoon, or this evening, we will review what we've reviewed the last 2 budget meetings. So I just want to call your attention to some changes. Mostly this document is the document that we have reviewed over the last 2 meetings, but there are 3 changes that I want to call your attention to. The first one being on, let me get to the page. Here on this page, you can see operating expense grounds, and there's an asterisk over by the $339,000. That indicates that there was a change from the last time that you saw this document. What was added to that, or the change, was that we have a provision to add $7,500 to the grounds budget for each of Jay and Freeze and Northwest Middle. So that's a provision that we've set up several years ago for most of our other high schools and middle schools to have turf care for their turfs and their athletic fields. At the time, Jay and Freeze did not have athletics, so we did not fund them. And Northwest Middle was sharing athletics, but since through our budget committee discussion, we said that we felt like Northwest Middle has so much activity on the high school and middle school fields that we need to fund them at the same level. So that changed, and there's a $15,000 adjustment in there. Okay, I also, in your board docs, gave you a justification document for those two if you need more information about that. So that's the change on that page. There was also a change, and we discussed it last time that we met, was we added what did we add? $15,000 or $150,000, sorry, for the rhino locks. After the safety committee met, they recommended, and I'm going to get to the page in just a minute where I'll show you, recommended that we fund the rhino locks for large areas.
22.
Page 22, thank you. I can't even. I'm getting close. There they are, $15,000 for rhino locks. We added that to the top of the capital outlay non-facilities. And again, this is the category where we typically get $1,020,000. And so since it's slated for the first, this would be funded. The third item that changed from the last time we discussed was we added the tuition reimbursement to the operational expansion per Mr. Powell's request, or the board's request. And I will show you also, don't mean to make you sick flipping back and forth, but just 1 minute. Okay. Here on the bottom of this page, tuition reimbursement, I also added a note. We did add the $200,000. That was the funding level it was when it was cut back in 2012. But I also indicated that it's probably not enough to fully fund this because we've had increase in students, increase in staff, and increase in tuition cost. So if for some reason, if somehow we were able to get this funded, we would have to look at a way to allocate it equitably. Easy for me to say.
So I have a question about that.
Okay.
In the years that it was funded, how much of it was actually allocated or requested from teachers?
Oh, more than budgeted. It was always over budget. So 100%, 100+%.
What did we do with those requests at that time? Did we just deny them?
No, we brought a budget amendment to the board and we did them.
Do we know exactly how much over it was, or?
Different years were different numbers. I remember a year it was at least $100,000 over, but that was probably the year right before we had to eliminate it.
So if we move that number to 400,000, then
Probably a
we'd
little-
be getting closer.
Probably a whole lot closer, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So those were the changes that we made based on the input. I also wanted to address sorry, Robert, you.
I'm sorry. Ms. Clutch, how many rhino locks or how many schools will be benefiting from the rhino locks?
We also included a justification document for that one too. And I believe, let's see, right here it is. 100 locks? Yeah, 100 locks.
Yeah, across how many schools though is I think the question.
Oh, across. So I'll let Leon.
I know we have an awful lot of doors, so.
We do. We're starting, we don't have an exact number. We're starting with our larger areas and checking each door to see which ones are more in priority. So to tell you exactly how many schools, we don't know, but we'll start with our larger areas.
Yeah, I was just interested in the methodology, and you just shared it. Thank you.
in the budget, or just specific clarification items, and I wanted to address those, and I'm going to roll back up into our continuation items just for a second on this page. So just for clarification, on the first item, the provision to increase locally paid staff to match the state increase, these are our locally paid teachers. There are a total of 94 locally paid teachers right now. Of that, 60 are paid with county funds and the other 30 are paid with fund balance. And so that's been a number that we've been tracking over the years. Is we had, started with 80, we're down to 30. We hope to be able to eliminate that. Best case scenario, I would say, I hope and want to eliminate 15 this year and then 15 the following year. But of course, we never know until the budget gets approved by the state what we're really in for.
And just as clarification, that's eliminate paying them from fund balance, not eliminating positions.
Teachers, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So there are 94 teachers that we pay locally. Also, in addition to that, there are 4 items of pay increases here that we discuss. And just for clarification, so that you know, each category of staff are eligible for 2 of the pay increases. So our teachers and certified staff, and I lump those in a category generically, they're going to be eligible for the state pay increase, and they're also going to be eligible for the supplement increase. So the first item on this page and the last item on this page, okay? Our non-certified, everyone else that's not a teacher or certified staff, in that category, they're going to be eligible for the state raise, and they're going to be eligible for the compression. So each category is eligible for 2 different areas. Okay? Okay, let me get. Also in the second area, so there are about 94 teaching staff that we're talking about here, but in that other category that we talked about, clerical, custodial, APs, all of those, there's about 406 folks in that category that are paid locally. Okay. And I think that was all of the questions that needed clarification. If I've left anything out, please let me know.
Okay, board members, any questions? Ms. Norris, any questions on the budget? Anyone else? Carol?
I only have one, and y'all, you probably answered, but you know that I was kind of in and out, and this year, unfortunately, I was not in on the budget hearings, and I missed that.
I missed
So
you.
next year, I'm probably going to raise my hand and say that I'd like to participate in that. The only thing that I had a question, I was noticing on the continuation, and it's maybe a kind of a simple one. Oh, wait a minute, let me go back here to where it asks for the additional 10 assistant principal / dean positions at various middle high schools for $800,000. What is that actually for? Is that for growth? Is that for, what is it for?
It's for the traditional middle schools and high schools that don't already have a dean position. Is basically, and I'm probably not the person to speak in detail about it, but we do have a justification form for it, and a lot of it was addressed with the student discipline issues, and so there's so many administrative duties that our administration has to do or should be doing. It's with the discipline and getting those administrative duties done, it's just, there's just not enough time in the day.
I mean, is it, I mean, normally, and the reason I say that, normally I know that like at our middle schools and our high schools, normally if they have an assistant principal or, you know, we've done it on population, okay? If you've got X, Y, you get 1 principal or I mean, 1 AP or 2 APs. Now, we're saying, okay, we're not going to look at that form, but we're going to give you another one. Is that what you're basically telling me at this point now?
Yeah, I understand your question now. That makes sense. So what happens is because we don't have enough positions to allocate it based on that formula, then schools just don't get an additional assistant principal or dean. So take a school that's got 1,800 students. If you use that formula, you would allocate another position. But because we don't have the money or the funds to do it, we push that back down into the allotment that we have. But if we were doing it appropriately based on the formula, we would already have these positions. We just don't have the money to pay for them.
So this is getting,
It would get us closer in line to where the formula would have you be.
okay, because, I mean, basically, one of our speakers just mentioned, hey, we need some additional help in certain areas. So this would basically maybe help in some of these other areas and some of the schools that have the discipline problems or have the problems. So this is, how are we going to decide where these individuals go?
So I would suggest or recommend that we continue with a formula. And so we would have to look to see how much money we got and how the formula applies. Whereas if it was 1 to 800 before, maybe it's 1 to 700. But it's 1 to 800 we try to, but then we cap it out. So our schools that exceed that will never get another position because we just don't have the positions to give.
Are we going to look too at the discipline, the ones with the higher discipline? Are they going to are they going to go to the top of the spectrum before the numbers?
That's been our practice over the last couple of years. If we've been able to allocate a dean position, we've looked at the high-risk schools and the ones that have high discipline issues. But with not having the funding and knowing whether it would be funded, we haven't actually determined the exact formula or method of allocation yet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Walter?
On slide 2, and this is where I keep going back to, but just a quick question on the $59 million on the bottom there. Where does that number come from?
That's the amount of money that the county is currently funding us this year.
So, but their budget summary says that we get $63 million in operating.
So take a look at that little asterisk down. My asterisk has been removed. My goodness. So there was an asterisk last time that said that charter schools.
So the charter
was
school number is the
pulled
difference.
out.
So how much do we pay the charter school? How much?
There's
Is
definitely
that's
3
the
million.
difference, the
Yeah.
$3 million?
Yeah, yeah, I'm not sure what happened to my asterisk, but
Yeah, I think we should probably put that back in.
yeah,
there
I
so
think
that
so
we-
too.
Helps. But I mean,
Maybe it was everybody.
the other part is, really, this is a list of needs. This is not a budget, because we're asking for 25% more than we got last year. We've gotten, by my calculation, over the last 4 years, we've increased our budget by about 22%. We're asking for more than that in 1 year. That's not going to happen. We know that. So it's more a list of needs and this system needs.
You're exactly right. It is exactly a list of needs. That's our obligation to the county, is to let them know what our needs are. We're not,
But to expect any of this stuff to get funded, I don't think much is going to get funded at all, maybe $3 to $6 million. So.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
think, Mr. Walter, the key thing to look at is that column continuation. That's what we absolutely need to have
And I
to
think that's what
maintain
we're more or
current
less
service.
looking at for
Right,
for
and then
asking the county.
expansion is always
But
on
to
our
ask the
list.
county for 25% is
Yeah.
not realistic.
Yeah. Anything else? Okay. Thank you, Kelly.
okay, so that was part one.
Okay, okay. Oh, that's right.
So now, we're ready to move on. As we spoke about earlier in one of the budget sessions, oops, I'm sorry, we'll want to review our budget objectives with you, because this is your opportunity to address any concerns or changes that you feel like we need in the budget objectives for going forward. So we start the budget process in October, November, and so we need to know now, going forward, if there's any changes or tweaks or concerns you have about the budget objectives. And I'm going to ask Amy Louder to come up and guide you through that process. And again, I'm going to make you sick one more time. Just turn away till I get to the right page. Oops, sorry. Okay, there you go. Thank you.
Good evening, how are you? So you have in front of you the objectives that the current 2018-19 school year budget committee has compiled. They've made a couple revisions from the objectives that we used for this budget cycle. So if you'll take a look at those, you're going to see on the left-hand side is the actual objective. They're going to have a defined way of how they would like to utilize that and operationalize that definition for next budget committee. And then the weights, you've got those as you traditionally see in the TRIGO process. So if you take a look, the first objective is still the same. Comply with laws, policies, and negotiated agreements. That one's a critical item. If some item does not meet that, it is not available to become available on the agenda for consideration. Positive impact on safety, security, health, and sanitation. Making sure that the student has a positive learning experience. We want to make sure that we're bringing in the right staff, able to retain them, and keep them happy. So that's another really important factor for this particular budget committee. Positive impact on equity. Again, noting that that does not necessarily mean equal, it just means reaching a minimum set standard. Positive impact on return on investment. We did have a lot of discussion here. Ms. Furtenball had listed a couple suggestions early on in the budget process, and they were very good recommendations. The budget committee accepted those and said, we'd like to elaborate on that a little bit more. So you can see life cycle cost, efficiency, sustainability, recycling, and this is the new one, is repurposing. Wanted to make sure that we use that. It's for internal usability and finding new uses for existing structures. The next one is having positive impacts on programs that actually attract and retain families and businesses to the Cabarrus County area. And then continuing our partnerships with the community on community use and involvement. So if you can take a look at all of those. Is there any discussion or any questions on those? We'd like to have the...
Can I say one thing here with Amy? So ultimately in the TRIGO process, really these objectives are the most important thing. And so we got to the end this year and really asked the committee to spend some time and say, go back and look at the objectives. Because sometimes when you get to the end and say, oh, well, I don't really like that this came out to be the priority. Well, sometimes you may not like that, but it's because we followed the process. And so what we said to that group was, we really want you guys to go back through these and reprioritize them. And so we spent maybe a good hour with that, I would say. And Ms. Norris and Dr. Kirk were part of that. I think they were the only two up here that were part of that process. But so I would say to you guys as board members, is this is the most important part of the process, is to say, is this much of a priority and should it have this weight? Because if you think that it should be vastly different, it really will change the outcome. So it's an easy thing. After we'd spent 4 full days doing it, we kind of pushed them to say, hey, let's spend an hour on this because it really will dictate that. So it's an easy to kind of say, oh yeah, those look fine. But at the end of the day, they really are what dictate the score. So I would just kind of like to, one, emphasize that, and two, Dr. Kirk is a board member, not to put him on the spot, although that's clearly what I'm doing, is to, if he could speak to that, even what the discussion was about that, or maybe the priority, because if there are 3 or 4 or 5 board members sitting here saying, wow, I really think that, you know, there shouldn't be a 9, well, that really does dictate part of the process, and we don't really want to be out of line with what your objectives are. So I don't know, I'm not asking you to give a speech, but at least speak to that, because I think you were a vocal part of that process, right?
Thank you, Dr. Louder, and viewing audience. And this is a kind of a tough one, because if you look at just simply ROI, it's kind of over here, and if you've got a purely industrial mindset, it's very different from, say, an academic mindset or a progressive mindset or a social mindset. So we try to wrestle down, what does it mean to have a return on your investment, and what do you do when you turn in X to get Y? How do we get that recycling? The whole reusability became very, very important, especially as we look towards repurposing a lot of what we do to be good stewards of our fiscal assets. So I think the committee did justice. It was an hour well spent in case in point, case in point, case in point. And I think we wrestled through these highlights of what we've got now to better define what positive impact on ROI really means to us in our setting.
And I think to Robert's point, I think that the last statement there almost needs to be maybe even move that up above, you know, the physical part of the return on investment, because it's, in a way, these all work together, so that different items, objectives about equity spread across the district and whatnot, this really comes into play as well. So obviously, they have to all be intertwined to work together as objectives. But I would just suggest moving that last sentence, this also includes personnel, train the trainer, et cetera, and move that up right under the opening statement of make an investment.
So it'd be the
Just to
second.
show the,
The second line.
yeah, so it doesn't get lost.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's not really a change of wording, just reposition it.
Okay, so we
so.
can do that. Okay, any further questions or discussion? So everybody agrees this is a good foundation for the next budget cycle?
Yeah, and we're not voting tonight, so everybody can take time and absorb.
Yep. Yes.
And provide feedback
Sure.
by next week. So,
All right,
yeah,
all right, thank you.
thank you. Okay, now we finish. I wasn't scrolling, I scrolled down through over the weekend, but I didn't scroll now, so. Okay, board members, we'll go into a topic under board discussion, and that is the discussing the staff recommendation for teacher recognition certificates. So you have have received two pieces of information. I put them into one email last night for you, so you had them in front of you. The first one is what staff recommended for schools and teachers who exceeded expected growth under the North Carolina accountability model for the 18-19 school year. So teachers who exceeded growth in the following areas would be recognized: K2 assessments, EOGs, EOCs, NCFEs, and I don't remember what that acronym is, and CTEs that are reported in EVOS. So I suggested that we kind of talk about this on a who, what, where, when, why kind of mode. So I think we know the why part of it, why we want to recognize achievement. But for the who, recognize teachers as individuals who have met this category of growth, and the school overall is.
I was just saying,
Walter?
for public's purpose, you used a lot of acronyms. It'd be helpful if somebody could explain exactly what that is.
Yes, so for the North Carolina, so the K2 assessments, I think that's clear without going into a lot of detail of what actually occurs in those assessments. The EOGs are end of grade tests, and those are for the elementary grades. And what levels, what grade levels are there? We might need your help, Dr. Hill.
Third, fourth, and fifth, and sixth, seventh, and eighth. Matthew, you want to talk about the EOGs and
So EOGs are, thank you, Matthew.
EOGs are grades 3 through 8, reading, math, and grades 5 and 8 for science. Do you have any other specifics you want me to go over?
Okay, and then EOCs are for high schools, end of course test.
Correct, and they're for particular subjects, biology, English 2, and math 1. So whatever grade level they take that course.
Okay. And then the NCFE?
The NCFEs are listed down here by subject for your high schools, and that's basically starts with advanced functions
Can we
and
have the
modeling.
acronym, please?
Oh, North Carolina Final Exam.
Okay.
These are all, quote, state assessments, and there are two categories. Your EOGs, EOCs are one category, and your North Carolina Final Exams are another category.
Okay, and the CTE are end of course or end of pathway test?
They're essentially...
And those are career technical education?
Right, career technical education, and they're essentially the post-assessment at the end of the course.
Okay. So board members, are those the right things you would like to have recognized? Mr. Powell, I know you initiated this conversation.
Yes, ma'am. I'm fine with recognizing all of those assessments and those that are exceeding growth in those assessments. I think this topic was initiated because so much of the data about our county and our school district is pulled from the state assessments that are the EOG and the EOC. And so that's why I initiated this topic, because there's so much importance that is put on that small collection of assessments. And so I just, thought about how we could kind of highlight the excellence that is occurring in those classes because they are doing essentially the heavy lifting of the district in those, I think it's maybe 14 assessments, 15 assessments. At one time I thought it was 17, but it looks like we don't do a pre-assessment in math in third grade, so we don't have growth. But, or else we just left it off here. Is that, okay, that's, okay. So that we could go into our district and identify those teachers that are doing an above average job, and even according to the state, those that are exceeding growth for those particular subjects. So I think that identifying a top 10 in those particular subjects, in addition to recognition for all of those areas, I think would be good. I think that, I look at the end of course for biology, for example, and to know that we have one, I don't know if anybody else had a chance to open this, but to know that we had one teacher that was exceeding growth in biology for the entire district of 33,000 students. That teacher should be, I think, probably commended, or that's a pretty powerful statement. And then only 10 in the entire district for Math 1. There's a top 10 right there. There it is. I think those teachers should be recognized, and maybe even a little further than that in biology. Surely there's 10 teachers that were demonstrating growth. But anyway, I still think that identifying the top 10 and giving them special recognition for each of the end of grade and end of course, along with identifying those that exceeded in all of the other kind of non-reported, I guess, I don't know how to describe the other tests that don't get we don't get measured on, so to speak.
Well, I believe the proposal is not separating a top 10 or top number, but everyone who exceeded growth.
Right. I like that idea. I think
Okay.
we should keep it, and I think maybe just add to it to recognize the top 10 in each of those EOG and EOC courses would be another way to kind of enhance this proposal.
And I'm looking at the numbers here. We don't actually even have 10 in some of these, like English Language Arts 3. So I'm wondering if initially we should just stay with recognizing everyone, and kind of see how that goes for a year.
English Language Arts 3 is not a EOC. That's down in which is fine.
The final exam, it's a final exam. Yeah.
That's
You're
correct.
you're saying there's a number associated with the score, not just an exceed?
Yeah.
The end of course exams and the end of grade exams are what our district is measured by academically.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I suggest that we recognize those particular teachers that are exceeding growth in a little bit different manner than the North Carolina final exam, of which you just mentioned one, and the CTE post-assessment, and then certainly the K2 assessments, which are a collection of early literacy and fluency.
Okay, if we can flip back to the proposal, so that this does include everybody listed on the chart, and it's not by name, it's just by subject matter who accomplish that with their classes. So the teachers, there's a proposal there for a district certificate, something we would design from, probably Ms. Boone's area might design that for us, with some signatures on it. The principal would actually take care of the distribution of the certificates to the teachers who meet the criteria. Perhaps they could do that at a staff meeting or something. Does that sound reasonable to everyone? That would be what, and Ms. Norris, we welcome your insight on this. Okay. And then it has who would kind of be providing us this information. So Mr. Fales, accountability, would provide us a list of the teachers. I'm guessing that would be from you. HR communications would help with the certificate design and the signatures and whatnot. And then the superintendent would provide a letter to go with the certificate describing what it's for. So, for the school, and this would be for schools that get expected growth. That's really not at an individual level. Can you explain that?
Exceeds, those that exceed, so at the school, and I may have to.
And have the,
I'm sorry, I may have to have Matthew come and explain that.
would that be a plaque with the teachers' names on it who exceeded for that year, or?
It would just recognize the school as a whole, so the plaque.
Who
would
exceeded growth.
Who exceeded expected growth, and this year we had 9 of those schools
Okay.
that actually did that. And it would recognize, we'd have them come to the actual principal and the school improvement team come to the board to receive that plaque.
Okay.
On behalf of the school.
Okay. So, board members, how does, I guess, this proposal sound to you to do for a first year process to see how it works out?
Yes, ma'am. The process is fine by me. Clarification, when we had the numbers of teachers who met, or I'm sorry, exceeded these goals, in any of these categories, were we talking about the same person twice? Or were these individual, I mean, I can imagine somebody teaching a similar level of the same discipline, exceeding growth in 2 different areas, so.
So I'm going to bring Matthew up to help answer that question.
I did not pull the data in that way, but it is very possible, sorry. I did not pull the data in that way, but it is very possible to have a teacher who, for example, teaches 4th grade and they teach reading and math and they exceeded in both.
Okay, so, okay, just, is it possible?
It is possible.
So the
I can't
numbers
pull it
on
back.
this sheet is 330, right? So, but there could be some duplicates
Who were really exceeding
in more than one area.
expectations. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Powell, are you okay with this as a first?
No, ma'am,
round?
I'm not. I think that we can do better. I think we can really identify those teachers that are really just putting themselves out there by teaching an end-of-grade assessment course or an end-of-course assessment in high school. I think those teachers, there's a lot of them that have just kind of toiled away in the background and have been, just really making our district shine, and we don't do anything to recognize those teachers. And if you're, one of the few that are in the top 10 every single year of exceeding growth, I think that we should recognize that. And like in English 2, for example, we only have 3 that are exceeding growth, but we still have a top 10 that we could recognize as the 10 highest performing teachers in the area of growth for that year. It doesn't have to just be 3. Just my thoughts.
Excuse me, Mr. Powell, clarify for me, are you looking for the top 10 across all of Cabarrus County schools? So right now, there's 10 plus 3 plus 1, there's 14 listed. So you conceivably, of those 14, you're going to pick 10 from that, or do you want, help me understand, the scope of what you're trying?
I think in that case, all 14 would get recognized as exceeding growth. That'd be excellent. Go through the process that Ms. Furtenball kind of explained with the superintendent's certificate, et cetera. But 10 of those 14, just by virtue of who had the highest 10 growth scores, they get a little something different. They get a top 10 certificate. And I just think it's kind of a neat way to reward the 10 highest performing, at least for that year, in that subject.
Okay,
That
so you're
was the
looking at a
suggestion.
list of stars and superstars.
There you go.
Yeah, I worry about picking a number like that, like a top 10 that's kind of arbitrary across a district as large as ours. So I guess I like the idea of, wow, if a teacher exceeded growth, then just let's recognize all of them and not make a subset.
I do too. I agree with you. And then recognize the superstars as well.
Madam Chair, I would then move to support this process for next week, to put it on. action.
For what's presented here,
As-
or
as
to
presented-
make a top 10
As presented for
scenario?
313, and then we can distill it further. as-
And see how, I guess, I feel like we need to start somewhere and see how it goes and see the plus minuses of it and see how it's received.
Because right now, we're looking at, what, 10% of our current education, teacher population. If we have 2,000 teachers, 313 being recognized, some dupes, so you're going to have probably, what, 13% of our
Yeah.
entire teaching population will be getting some kind of certificate, and if it becomes too commonplace, it loses its impact.
Yeah.
They're still good, I still want them to exceed, but I don't want it to trivialize the process.
Okay. Do we want to put this on a consent or action agenda for next week to formalize it? I don't know that we need to vote on it.
In years past, when they did a top 10, maybe 2011, 2012, it wasn't put on the agenda. It was just kind of presented to the board because it was a decision made by staff to recognize the top 10 in the EOGs and the EOCs. I don't think it included anything else but that. I think maybe you were on the board when that happened 3 times, I think.
Yeah, I don't remember a top 10 per se.
Yep, it was definitely done.
Yeah.
Jason Van Hukelum was here at that point, and he did the presentation, and very, very nice presentation, actually. And so I would be fine putting this on the action agenda for next week, no problem. Since it came to the board and, here it is, let's go ahead and vote on it.
Okay. So put it on action for next week. And Dr. Hill, I don't know if you can dig up any old documentation about what the top 10, how that was formulated?
I think we'll work together to figure, I guess we can go back perhaps to some board docs.
Yeah, I honestly don't remember, but it probably was done outside of the board, as was mentioned. And so we didn't know the details like we're hearing now, so.
It was a presentation to the board. It should be on the video if you want to watch some 2010.
Okay, any other discussion on this item? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to section 7, the budget amendments. Ms. Klutz, we'll welcome you back.
Thank you. I have several budget amendments for you today. We'll start with state. And you can see the first one is just a sales tax refund, so we're budgeting that so that we can spend it. The next one is NCVPS, and so the way that the state does that is they adjust us for 75% of that the first of the year, and then this time of year they adjust us for the normal, the remaining 25%. So this is an expected adjustment. You have some minor adjustments there. We did receive a state allotment for the early grade reading literacy, and so those funds were allocated to the school. That's I think there was some press about that you probably saw, where we're allocating to teachers for teacher use. You have your normal substitute reimbursement from the state. Then the state has also recognized the fuel adjustment, the hike in diesel fuel that we were actually talking about as it related to construction just recently. And then you have a small reclass adjustment for our restart funds. And so that's all of the state adjustments. Are there any questions on the state?
Is the state fuel reimbursement on track?
It is now with that adjustment.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
we're-
it's on par with previous years, and
It
it's...
is. And so the state doesn't guarantee that they'll adjust for the rate increase, but when they do have funds, they do reimburse. So we're fortunate that we were able to get the funds.
Thank you.
Okay. The next one is our local account, and so this is to just record the effective teacher training funds that we're receiving and processing. Okay. The next one is federal, some reclasses due to indirect cost you can see there. Also, you can see where we recorded our sales and use tax refund for all of the federal programs. Then you can see a small reclass for CTE travel reimbursement, and finally a reclass for our Title I funds. The next one is our capital outlay budget amendment. So as we've been working with the county, they've been processing their debt, and so they were able to process the lobs for $25 million for the Southwest Elementary School. You can see that adjustment here. The final one on this attachment is our Fund 8. So you can see the reclassify for the preschool funds into transportation and longevity and health insurance. You also see the $10,000 grant received from Elevation Church to W.M. Irvin Elementary School, and also a $100,000 Chobani Foundation grant received to W.M. Irvin Elementary School.
Thank you, Chobani.
Yes.
And hopefully everybody has viewed the video by now from the Ellen Show to see how exciting that was.
That was exciting. And then finally, in a separate attachment, because of the timing, I did a budget amendment to reverse what the board approved in the February meeting for redistricting contract. I reversed that and reallocated it out of fund balance. Are there any questions on the budget amendments?
Consent agenda, board?
Not for the local fund.
What's that?
Not for number 4, I don't, again, I just object to that spending.
Okay, so budget amendment, or the first for the April budget amendments, that will go on consent? Okay. And then the second budget amendment, which is listed as budget amendment 4, on action. Is that correct? Preference? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next item, 7.02, the policies for approval on first reading. Ms. Reimer?
Good
And
evening.
Mrs. Burns?
We have 5 policies tonight up for first read. The first one is 1740. It's a board, attorney, and district requested change. In B1, there's changes to school days to working days for central office staff. This eliminates delays due to student vacations. B2 clarifies grievance as a written complaint, adds parent, guardian as a grievant on behalf of the student, provides appropriate avenue for grievances of inappropriate conduct by school employees. D4 removes attorney as a representative at level 1 and level 2 grievance meetings. E1 is clarifying language. E1 for district level decisions of or if a principal determines a level 2 is more appropriate, that it can be heard first. E2 increases the time scheduled to meet with the parent to 10 days. E4 clarifying language, and E5 is clarifying language.
Okay, board members, any questions on 1740, 4010, 5001?
Madam Chair, I'd like to request that 1740 be on the action agenda.
Any other questions? Okay.
Policy 3540 is Comprehensive Health Education Program. This is a required and recommended change. Changes terminology in the first paragraph based on the changes to the state law. It's required. Includes other clarifying changes to wording, which is recommended, and updates the legal references.
And let me just, if you will, step back. Mr. Harrison, is there other information you need regarding that policy, or?
No, ma'am.
I know you had the concern about the attorney
And
representation.
we've had those discussions.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay.
I believe there's any additional information, but I won't ask for that now.
Okay.
We can have separate offline conversations if you'd like.
Yes, sir. Okay, so 3540, consent agenda?
Policy 2300 is the next 3 are very minor edits. Policy 2300, Ms. Monroe found a time date in that time for the board meeting was wrong, so we've corrected that. We have received some other minor edits today from a couple of board members as far as some grammatical concerns for 2310 and 3100, but those are all just minor edits to the policies. The board approved policy 2310 in March, so that's a previous policy that we just looked at, and then policy 3100 again, required changes but very minor edits to wording.
Okay, so 2300, consent agenda? Okay. 2310, consent. 3100, consent.
It's a technical change to reference section of the 2300. So if you go to your references, it's just a very minor edit.
At the end of 2310, end of
Second paragraph.
We changed 2 to 3.
That was the reason why I actually went back, because we changed the number 2 to a 3, meaning minor edit. Typically, we don't have to really bring these back, but we always want the board to be aware of any changes we make.
Okay, so 1740, 4010, 5001, that combination will be action. The remaining 4 in first reading will be consent. Okay? So the second reading policies?
Yes, we have had no comments from anyone via email, and no comments from the board for these, so.
Board members consent for the second reading?
I'd still like to see the technology responsible use on action.
You'd like to see it?
I'd like it on action.
And
Okay, do you have questions you want to ask
I just think
staff?
it's too restrictive to staff.
I'm sorry, explain it. Too restrictive?
I think it's too restrictive, and this goes back a couple years when we voted on it last time.
It's too restrictive for staff members? You mean on what they're allowed to do at school or what?
That's correct.
Madam Chair, can I ask a kind of a technical question about this policy? Number 18 indicates that students are prohibited from using their personal devices as private Wi-Fi hotspots during instructional hours. How are you going to stop them? I mean that respectfully.
Having to approve this policy.
I mean that respectfully, but how technologically is that prevented, or is it just don't do it, and if you do it?
Well, we can prevent it through technology, but it's against the FCC to do so. So here's the situation, and it's causing a huge problem, especially in our high schools. When we stopped the guest network and the students were streaming, looking at things they shouldn't have on their own plans, we stopped the guest network, then students and or their parents bought the Wi-Fi hotspots on the phone. They cost about $10 a month. The problem is the students would call those different things, or other students would hop onto those hotspots. So am I a student in a class and I see these multiple hotspots, jump on it, and then all of a sudden I'm complaining 10 minutes later because the Chrome's not working. It's because they overloaded the personal hotspots. So we worked with the attorneys, and it is absolutely illegal to block hotspots. The FCC says you can't. What you can do is set a policy that says, students, thou shalt not activate their hotspots in the classroom. And that's why we have this policy, and we need you to approve it. We especially want to get it approved before we go into online testing. Even if we collect the cell phones, they can still have that activated, and it can cause a huge issue.
And so what are the disciplinary consequences of violating number 18?
Well, we would work with the principals, especially the high school principals, on putting in consequences, the way you do any other type of discipline for something that's being violated. But, you know, we can track down the students that are doing it, and we've done it, but it takes 2.5, 3 hours to track down. We don't have the manpower to do that. So the recommendation from the attorneys was to add this to this policy.
I believe there is technology, and Michael, you will know better, that you can capture what hotspots are active at any time and just keep a record of it. And then those are typically owned. People don't change their hotspot names very frequently.
These kids do. They're
They
very
do?
bright. They actually
Just randomize it?
Yes. They actually have an app that changes it about every 2 to 3 minutes. And believe me, they get quite creative with the names of these apps. I mean, Wi-Fi. They really are. We need to employ every single one of them. But yes, there is Adam can certainly do that, capture it, but it does get changed.
Okay, and it almost sounds like, based on what they may be naming hotspots, they're in violation of multiple policies.
Absolutely.
And just for clarification, does this policy have the student consequences, other policy cross-referenced in it? I mean, if there are consequences and the principal
If
would
it
be-
doesn't, we can
does.
certainly cross-reference it if it's not there.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so board members,
It is.
the first policy, technology responsible use, will put on action at Mr. Walters' request, and then 4320, 4325, may those go on consent? Okay. So the second and third policies on second reading will go on consent. Okay, any other questions on policies? Any other discussion? Okay, we'll move down to the items for the action agenda at the business meeting. The first is the naming of the new Southwest Elementary School. I always enjoy seeing so many responses, suggestions, although there were some maybe meant as a joke in there, but board members, I sent you by way of email just a chart that has all of these names listed, and the elements of the policy 9300, naming of school facilities. So you can kind of do your evaluation against it and just ask you if you would reply, and please reply back to Carolyn and myself. I'll put the list together, but just so both of us are receiving it. What up to your top 5. If you really only have a top 3, that's fine. We'll work with that. We'll consolidate and hopefully do like we did with the high school naming, kind of see where there's some commonality amongst the board members, and maybe we can get to a kind of a short list and then have the final vote next week. Does that sound acceptable?
You wanted it
Okay.
back in by Wednesday, didn't you?
Yeah, Wednesday evening. So when I come home from work, I'm hoping I'll have replies from everyone, and I already have 2. Thank you for those. And then I can just put them all together in the chart and maybe even get it back to you by Thursday evening, so.
Just for clarification on this situation and going forward, is this the list and there is no other list? And if it's not on this list, it would not be added later on? Or is it
Yes,
the
that is
board's
the
prerogative
list
to?
that Ms. Monroe received. I did add, there was one she did not include on her list because it said for high school, but the fact that it was submitted this time, I did put it on the chart in the event anybody was interested in that one. I just wanted it to be complete. I didn't see.
And I mean, next Monday night, if the board chose,
Uh-huh.
would the board entertain an idea for a brand-new name to be added to this or not? That's all I mean.
We should not really. We should stick with, there was
As
a
long as we
time
understand.
frame for submission.
The list is the
Yes.
list.
Put in a submission, so one of us could.
Add it to your submission to Cindy and Carolyn, and that way it definitely gets on there.
Oh, if you have a brand new name? Oh, you're just saying if somebody came forward. Yeah. Yeah, Mr. Walter, I didn't hear what you said.
I said, you went through the process, you submitted a form for somebody.
Yes, Mr. Fur and I submitted one. So anyways, okay, so we don't really need to have any other discussion here. We'll just appreciate your responses by Wednesday evening. Like I said, then we'll consolidate, we'll narrow it down. I expect we'll probably come up with a top 3 to 5, cross-section where there's at least 4, maybe 3 or 4 people interested in a certain name. So, okay, next item, 8.02, the school picture bids for K to 8. Mrs. Reimer?
Good evening again. I'd like to take just a moment to explain our process for the staff recommendation for our picture bid. Policy 6450, board policy, states that services do not require competitive bidding. However, staff feel as though to create an opportunity for all those in our community as well as the best opportunities for our students, we want to create that and make sure that we follow through with the board with that. So we did do that process for the picture. We posted our RFP on February the 9th. We closed that on March 2nd. Bids were submitted by mail. They were closed and sealed. And on March 5th at 2 p.m., staff opened those bids confidentially. They were tabulated, and our staff recommendation is based on the low bid. So based on our low bid recommendation, Loftus Studios would be our staff recommendation.
Just to clarify, is it an RFP or is it a bid?
Yeah, just for their services. We called it an RFP.
So we call it an RFP, so that's a request for proposal. Okay.
Yeah, and they sent a proposal, yes, sir.
Can I ask what's the calculation or what's the assumption in this chart? X number of packages, or what standard are you using to derive the recommendation?
There was a full submission form for each vendor to send, and it listed exactly what the expectations were, and I can give you a couple of examples, but it's quite long. For example, we want price for packages A and E and editions of 1, 2, and 3 on different sheets. We want memory book prices for a package D of 3 sheets, so it's quite specific. I'm happy, that proposal was online, but I'm happy to share that with the board if you'd like it.
Okay.
And assume 500 packages of B and 342 of C, and I guess what I'm asking is, what's the common denominator between
It just,
these
I guess,
these
keep in
companies?
mind, it's not a budget item, so it completely self-funds based on what parents, so there's no, my understanding is there's no quantity multiple. This is just what parents would pay, and then I think the PTO or the school makes the profit if they help facilitate the picture days.
Yeah, so it's just a service we provide to our families, and then the vendors themselves do all the marketing, and so they have, and it's for K-8 only, just school pictures, so they don't really have an idea.
They take the risk
Yes, sir.
of the number of packages that they will sell, according to their price.
Now, who is our current vendor again?
Our current vendor is Strawbridge Studios, and we have been very, they've been great for the past 3 years, and I don't have anything but positive things to say about them.
Mr. Shaw, since this is a service, so quality obviously is important in a service as opposed to just a buy a widget. Are we, or the staff, are they allowed to consider things that are just not the monetary columns? Because when I look down these columns, there's, ups and downs. It's not like one row is completely less than any other row. So are we allowed to consider the quality of service as we know it?
Yes, you can. Services really do not have to be bid as a legal matter, though when it's sent out, then people generally will follow the bid process and expect it to be followed. But I think the staff could take into account just price or could take into account other qualities such as past performance. But they'd probably like some direction by the board if they want the staff to go beyond just the lowest price, or whether they would like the staff to consider other matters as well. But they certainly could.
Mr. Powell?
Well, I was paying attention to your opening comments about benefiting the community. And so just kind of, Googled Life Touch real quick, and it doesn't appear like they're a local company. I think they're
That is correct.
either they're getting ready to sell, or something's going on. I think they're being acquired maybe, or something like that, from Minnesota. And so are any of these, I'm just making the assumption Carolina Photography, because I don't really know these companies. Are they local companies, or?
So, yes and no.
I think that's important also.
Our current Strawbridge is a local company. The Jostens Picks obviously is a national company, as well as, they have local representatives. As far as the other two, I'm not exactly sure. I don't know if they're national or just in this area.
Well, I'm guessing a lot of these companies maybe have a broader regional or national presence, but they have local representatives.
That is correct.
Okay, so is Strawbridge local, or?
Yeah, Strawbridge is local.
What is the memory book B, and why didn't Life Touch even bother bidding on that particular item, or not bid, but why didn't they provide a proposal for that item?
Okay, there's two options, and again, it's quite complicated, but Memory Book A is all pictures are in color, and Memory Book B options are black and white pictures and only a color cover for those. And Memory Book is like a middle school annual somewhat. So it looks as though Life Touch says we're not going to do any black and whites. We'll do them all in color.
Okay, so they just eliminated that option.
Yes.
That's something they would.
So you can get
pursue.
color or, yes, sir.
And Madam Chair, correct me if I'm wrong, while we're adding a consideration of whether or not they have a local representative or somewhat are considered local. Can we get a quick rundown of whether or not we have done business with each of these in the past?
So as far as my knowledge,
Again,
I would be
again,
happy
if-
to. Dr.
again,
Louder
if
did
that
this
is
job before
allowed
me.
within the process.
I'll try to, some of our schools have done business with Life Touch. Some of our principals have chosen to use them for what we call spring pictures. From my understanding, a lot of our principals have been very satisfied with using Life Touch. I haven't heard any say no, but again, that's up to them to choose, so they wouldn't come to me to complain if there had been an issue. Strawbridge, we definitely have. We've had those for the past 3 years and have had a wonderful relationship. I think we have had very few, if any, concerns with those. Jostens we work through with some of our graduation materials, but I'm not familiar if we've ever used those for school pictures in K-8, and I'm not familiar with Carolina or Metro. And Dr. Louder, again, he did this job before I was in this role. He may remember that, but I don't.
Yeah, so just historically, we had a local person that had the picture bid for, it was back when I did the annual at Central Cabarrus, so 25 years ago or 20 years ago. And that person had the contract for quite a while, and the board actually strongly encouraged that there was a bid process, even though legally we didn't necessarily have to have one, as Mr. Shaw said. And so that local company had the contract, as I said, for well over 20 years, maybe over 30 years, I don't know exactly. And then when the last bid process we did was when this contract was awarded, I believe, which was 3 years ago, because this is the end of the 3-year contract, and Strawbridge got that contract at the time. So as Ms. Reimer said, Jostens, they may do, they did the yearbook for certain high schools, but as far as the K-8 picture taker, it really has only been the one former local company in Strawbridge, I think, in the last 25 years, the best that I know. But like you said, there's a long history there.
Okay. I was just looking up some of these other companies too. I see Strawbridge is based out of Durham, so not exactly Cabarrus, but they have a local representative. So, Mr. Powell?
I think that the spring pictures, a lot of schools have transitioned from Life Touch to Strawbridge. I'm not sure how many, but I think it's a significant number. Maybe it's because they're already there in the school to do the fall pictures. I don't know, but Life Touch didn't have the contract before in the fall, but they had the spring, but now they're transitioned over to Strawbridge. I'm kind of curious as to
So a lot of
how
times
many
I'll
and
get
why.
requests from the principals, and I have gotten them this year asking, can they use Life Touch for their spring pictures? And so, the spring pictures are different than, and there are no contracts with that. It's
Explain,
all-
we have fall pictures and now we have spring
Okay,
pictures.
yeah,
Now
okay.
you kind of lost us.
So our K-8 photos are our school pictures. Those are the ones that we've all had since we were since we were in school. Same kind of setup. Every kid gets their picture made. That's what we're talking about when we talk about K-8 photos. It's fall pictures. And then the spring, some of our schools, specifically a lot of our middle schools, have chosen to do spring photos where they bring in a photo group and kids can take pictures together or whatever. It's just different groups. And principals have emailed me and questioned me, can they use Life Touch, several different times. And so some of them do. And the people that have used Life Touch that I'm aware of have been very complimentary of them as well in the spring.
So now we have different rules for different types of pictures. Why?
So we don't have any rules for spring pictures, and same thing for prom. We don't have any rules for prom pictures and those kind of things. Principals are allowed to set those up with
So why are we
different
having
groups.
rules? Why do we have rules for this?
Well, I think Dr. Louder kind of spoke to that it kind of goes back to a period of time where the board was very heavily involved, and as you can tell tonight, the board gets very heavily involved, and so do the vendors, and so that's why we have a process.
We're representing the parents, and they obviously want the best deal that they can get, and that's the way we can help them do that.
Sure. I would be happy
But you're telling me we've got different people coming into our schools, and it seems to be kind of crazy, so.
Yeah.
It's just not consistent. I think there should be some consistency here.
Well, I think the goal of the fall pictures is so that we have the digital pictures for emergencies, right?
Yeah, we do,
So
and
that's
so everyone's
required.
included in the fall.
Yeah.
Like, everybody gets their picture made, whether parents want them or not. In the spring, it's more of a optional, this group wants it. However, I think staff would be excited if you wanted to let us decide this and move on, but again, we want to include the board and make sure you guys are part of the process and understand why we chose
From my
what we chose.
perspective, that's a superintendent and staff.
Board, what's your pleasure? Do we want to get out of the deciding picture contracts business and let staff decide?
So I would very much like for the staff to own this and let us deal with what we're hired to do.
Yeah, and I will tell you, if I recall correctly, part of the reason it came forward is because we had multiple companies complaining to board members in the past.
Correct.
That is exactly correct.
And that's why it came forward. So
Maybe there should be some type of a guideline on how it
Well,
operates.
I was just going to suggest that I think that, starting with Cabarrus County and working out is my preference. I think that every dollar that we spend within Cabarrus County should be the preference, unless there's a reason to go outside, just like in your comments, it should benefit our community, which could be Cabarrus County first, and then North Carolina, and then outside if there's a dramatic reason.
But we need to excuse me.
Since we've gotten good service up to this point.
But we need
I
to
just don't see the reason
specify
to change.
that in our RFQ or whatever we set out. If we're going to specify that we're going to do that, we have to specify that when we put the RFQ out to start with, do we not?
There wouldn't be an RFQ if this went back to staff, but my concern is that in the past, we haven't necessarily taken care of our local people first, in my opinion. Maybe you disagree
Well, I
with
mean,
me.
I think we should.
take care of our local people
But I'm
first.
saying if we send out an RFQ, we have to say we're going to do that if we send out an RFQ.
now, I don't believe we need to state how we make a decision. We're only requesting the information. So you don't have to notify how you're making a decision. Mr. Shaw, is that correct?
It all depends on how the RFP or RFQ
Yeah.
is worded. I haven't had a chance to see
It,
Yeah.
it
It was
has
very
no-
general.
It has no identifying information of how we will choose. So it just gives, here's what we're asking for, send us your proposal.
And
And for staff, just briefly, real quick, we feel very similar. If pricing is very close, we have absolutely no issue with working in and out, and however Mr. Powell, kind of explained that, we're perfectly fine with that. But we would like to make sure that the pricing is close as it is in this situation.
And I would like to see that language.
Okay.
But assuming that the language is that way, then it's, that's price is one of various factors you can take into account, including
Correct.
Experience, locality. I don't have any problem with that either.
Then you'd have to rank them or have some type of ranking, wouldn't you?
Well, you wouldn't have to. You wouldn't have to.
Madam Chair, I'd like to recommend that we remove this agenda item from our business session next so we can let the staff determine the best photographer.
You okay with that?
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Second.
Board members? I don't think we need a motion to take it off. It will just be absent from the business meeting. And staff will make the decision. So, and that way they can account for,
I think staff has adequately heard our concerns,
Yeah.
and they can run with it from here on out.
Yeah.
Please run with them.
and one thing we have been very consistent with is buy local when possible. So,
That's not true. Not
Across the
true at all. That has not been the case since I've been on the board. And
No,
I've
we-
fussed and ranted up
I
here,
know,
and
and
I've
that's why I
had
don't
major
agree with
concerns
that. I
with
think
that,
we
and
should
that's
make
maybe
that
one of the
decision.
reasons why this proposal was brought to the board. So to hear you say that, and it makes it seem like you're not paying attention. But even though we did have a top 10 for a number of years, I just want to make sure that we spend our tax dollars as close to Cabarrus County as we can.
And I agree with you 100%, but unless we vote for it, we can't be sure of that.
okay, so Ms. Frymer, it's back to you and your team.
Thank
We
you.
didn't do a vote.
We don't have to vote to have an absence of an item, because we're not required to approve it.
It's on the agenda right now.
Right, for a discussion, but not for a vote. It doesn't have to be taken forward to the business meeting. It's not required to.
It's on the agenda right now. It hadn't been removed, it hadn't been anything, it's on there right now.
Yeah, and we had our discussion.
But it's
So,
still there.
Mr. Shaw, do we need to vote
Second.
to remove it?
Make it clear.
I think that what you're talking about is whether it's on the agenda actually for tonight, but it's not
Right.
yet set on the agenda actually for
Items for
Next week.
Is it? So I don't see that it automatically goes to the agenda next week
Yeah.
without further action by the board tonight. So I think it would be okay just to leave it as you've left it, the understanding it goes to staff. Board could also just make it clear and have a vote that this should be a staff item, but either way, I think it's fine.
So what's your pleasure?
I make a motion to put it on the action agenda for next week because I would rather not send the business to Minnesota. I would rather keep it in North Carolina.
But if we're giving it back to staff to decide, then we don't want it on the agenda.
So we do need to vote, are we going to take the staff or not?
Motion on.
Okay, I will, so David, you already made the motion? Or who?
The motion
A
is here,
motion is on the
doesn't have a
floor.
second.
The motion is there a second to Vince's motion to put it on the
I
agenda
will
for next week?
second Vince's motion.
Okay, so that, I just want a clarification. That sounds contrary to giving the decision back to
It
staff.
is contrary.
Okay,
And country.
so all in favor of Mr. Powell's motion to place this decision for the school pictures on our action agenda next week, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Mr. Powell, Ms. Carpenter are in the affirmative? Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All opposed, say nay. Nay. Okay, so the motion fails to put it on the action agenda for the board to make the decision next week. Now, yes, so for clarification, I will take a motion to turn the decision on the K-8 picture contract over to staff.
Madam Chair, so move.
Second.
Okay, so I have a motion by Dr. Kirk, a second by Mr. Harrison to turn the picture contract over to staff. Any
And
discussion?
Can we add the guidance that Mr. Powell says to consider local when making that
Oh,
decision?
okay, very good.
Yeah, I'll accept that amendment to the motion, yes.
Okay, so the motion is to turn the picture contract over to staff with the previous discussion regarding a preference to local companies if available. Okay. So all in favor of this motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Okay, so the motion, so Vince, are you for? Okay, so the vote is,
Fine.
okay, so which way are you, Ms. Carpenter?
I know.
Now you know what it feels like to be 1-6.
Been there
Okay.
before, and it won't be the last time.
So the motion passes 6
It's
to 1.
on my bumper
With
sticker.
Ms. Carpenter dissenting to turn the picture contract, K-8 picture contract decision over to staff as policy permits, with the preference from the board that local companies be considered with priority. Okay. All set? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Reimer. Okay, next we have Mr. Cohn with the PLC. Update information request.
Yes,
I'm not sure
there's a whole
what all to
lot
consider
involved
this.
with it, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for hearing me out, Madam Chair. So I come tonight before you requesting approval from this board to go before Cabarrus County Commissioners and request the reallocation of $80,000 of approved funding into another account as a part of this project. I went through, as I filled out the cover sheet, and provided a fairly lengthy narrative on why we were requesting this reallocation of funds. If you've had a chance to read it, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. I won't.
And board members, I sent you a chart that Ms. Carpenter and I received earlier today that is just a visual of the text in the
Well, for the
paragraph.
public's sake, can you give us kind of a
Sure.
summary?
So what happened is we worked through, this is a design, build, delivery method project. And what that means is that the general contractor has under his scope the architectural services for this project. So as a part of that, we're essentially writing one check to the contractor to cover everything for this project. as we worked through the budgeting and the design of this project itself, we went through several pricing narratives, all along staying well within where we thought we needed to be budget-wise. But ultimately, as you complete your design development drawings and establish construction documents, it's at that time the general contractor can actually put it out to his subcontractors for hard bidding. So once that was done, we came in and actually were about $30,000+ over our funded amount of $3,080,291. So we then at that time started value engineering with Lyle's Construction Company, who is our general contractor of record, and we were able to get that down about $10,000 to where we're essentially $20,000 over our funded construction amount on this project. So as I look through the overall project budget, we had, obviously we have different banks of money that we pull from, but we had established in this project early on before I was a part of it, a line in our soft cost for architectural fees of $100,000. So what I had requested and spoken with Ms. Klutz about is if we could capture some of that money that we did not feel like we would need for architectural services since they were under the scope of the general contractor to help subsidize our overages on the construction cost. So that's what a part of that money is going towards. Additionally, as we begin working through budgeting for our FF&E, which is our fixtures, furnishings, and equipment, we were considerably over budget in that area. And so as a part of this request, we're going to take $60,000 of this 80 and put it back towards our FF&E budget, and then the $20,000 again will go back towards the construction cost. Okay.
So I guess I would just like maybe more clarification or something on if that line item was put in with some thought at the beginning of the budget process, and we knew what design build meant. That was no surprise. What service are we now expecting not to have?
Do you want me to answer this since I wasn't a part of this? So essentially, as I understand it, and again, this budget was laid out before I was a part of this project, that line was established since it is a design build delivery method. The school system had less control over who that architectural firm was since they were coming as a team with the general contractor. Typically, we go through an RFQ process with architectural firms. We can kind of validate which ones we like, which ones we don't like based on, past experiences. But in this delivery method, since the general contractor was the team, and if we wanted that contractor to be a part of this project, but their architectural team was not up to our standards, so to speak, this money was allocated, as I understand it, to kind of come in and help subsidize those services and to look out for the best interests of the county.
But we were satisfied with their selection of Morrisburg.
Correct. So our selection for this project, just to go on record, is Lyle's Construction Company is our general contractor, and they teamed with Morrisburg Architects, who we have a history with both firms and have been happy with.
Mr. Shoemaker?
Okay, so continuing on, so essentially the $100,000 that you're talking about was insurance money, for the lack of a better...
Safeguard.
A safeguard money.
Safeguard.
And now we want to reallocate it, so you feel like the risk, which you're going to leave $20,000 in that line item as, I guess, safeguard money, just in case, and then you'll move the 60 towards the F&E because we underestimated the need or the furniture requirements for that.
Sure.
Because that's obviously we stumped our toe there, so I just want to get an understanding a little bit.
So being involved in the budget process from the beginning, we knew that FF&E budget was extremely tight. We assured the county multiple times that we would stay at and under a $4 million budget. And so as we reassured them time and time again, we tweaked our numbers. And if it comes down to the end of the day, we have to live with that budget, we'll live with that budget. But we want everybody to understand that we're not going to get brand new stuff. There's things that are going to have to be put aside, and we're gonna have to, pull furniture and other things from other buildings, and that's okay if that's what we need to do. But again, we're still under the $4 million. We're not asking the county for additional money. We're asking them to move it. So that's why we felt it was okay to ask you, to ask them to move that money, because we're not asking for additional money.
And my next question is, on the 20,000 for new construction or for the construction itself, that is again, a safeguard money. Are we experiencing some issues in that area that we need that 20,000?
That will be our contracted amount. The $20,000 will get us to where the contract amount is right now. Yeah.
So the contracted amount is really 3.1 million, adding the 20,000 in there?
Yeah, that's correct, yes. 3,100,291, yes.
So we needed that 20,000 no matter what. We were going to have to delve into this and have this transfer of the safeguard money.
Yes.
Yeah, and that doesn't bother me at all to take the architect money and move it to the construction budget, because that's really the lump sum.
Right.
But I just worry about taking this 60,000, how are we so off on the FF&E?
So there was originally when the budget was developed, there wasn't a land cost associated.
There wasn't a land
There
cost?
wasn't a land cost
Okay.
in the budget. And then I came back, we asked to buy the land, and that came out of the construction.
And that was a good price for the land.
And that was, it was the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
But that just pushes all of your budgets tighter than they were
Okay, so to
before.
come up with that 195 for that, what I'll call the DOT excess land
Yeah.
that they had, you took out of all the other pockets a
took
little
all
bit.
of it. We
Okay, so now we
squeezed
need to rebuild the FF&E pocket.
Correct,
Okay,
correct.
okay. David?
So in the big picture, you're watching the county's money very closely.
We're trying our hardest.
Okay. Any other questions, board members? Okay, do you want this on the action agenda or consent?
Consent, ma'am.
Consent.
Consent? Good with that, Brian?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and before we move,
Excuse me, is there a deadline for this? Are you watching a clock? Can you wait a week for our action? Sometimes you come up
Yes,
against
I
stuff
can.
that we needed
Yeah.
yesterday.
No, I can wait, that's fine. I mean, consent action, consent's fine with me, so.
and before we move on, I wanted to recognize Deputy Gatling from Weinkoff, School Resource Officer. Thank you for being here with us tonight. Okay, so next we'll go to the, there's really 3 agenda items that are very similar coming up. The PLC FF&E contract approval, and I guess this is really maybe a little bit different than a contract approval. I asked for a clarification on this earlier today, and it's more of an approval of purchasing method
Correct.
for the furniture, fixtures, and equipment.
So if we're asking the board to approve the method in which we make this purchase, contracts that are this large, we can go out and bid those individually. We can do state contract because the state has actually bid that for us, or we can use a cooperative purchasing agreement to satisfy our bid requirement. And we've found in the last 2 schools that using the cooperative business purchasing agreement has been a wonderful thing for our district, saves time, saves money, and gives us a lot of variety without having to take individual bids and consume all that time. And so that's what we're asking for you to approve.
Okay, we don't have the extra detail you sent me with my question on the agenda. We don't have that in board docs. Can all the board members get that?
Sure.
Just on what this method is, so maybe you want to explain it verbally, and then we'll have, so items 8.04, 8.06, and 8.07 are all really the same thing, right?
They are.
Yes. And what policy does this fall under?
It's our purchasing policy.
Purchasing
So it's bidding and purchasing. I can get the number for you, but I don't have it right. It's purchasing bidding. Okay.
So So do you just want to, I guess, provide a verbal overview, and then maybe we can get something written in board docs?
Oh, sure.
Before we vote next week?
So, I'll take Brian's notes here.
It's got my name up here.
So using the cooperative purchasing agreement satisfies our legal agreement to bid. It also minimizes the contested bid issues. And so if we go out and bid those, the board could be dealing with contestant. I'm having a hard time talking today. This allows us to have the ability to have one vendor control the entire project. So that vendor is going to go out and do the pricing. That vendor is going to order and stage and do all the logistics associated with it. We're going to have one purchase order for all of the product rather than having the school treasurer and the school principal sit down and process, 100 or 200 purchase orders. All that works well. And then the logistics on the back end, all that comes in within a prescribed time frame that's set aside by our construction department. And it has worked really, really good over the last two projects. We started, the first one was Odell that we started, and then we did Mount Pleasant Middle. Both of those worked really well. Very pleased. And yes, and I did do a bullet kind of, I did a formal presentation with a PowerPoint back when we did Odell, and I just took those bullet points of those pros and cons and sent it to Ms. Furtenbaugh today, and I'm happy to update board docs to reflect that.
I'm going to send them that list of bullets, but if you have either that presentation or something to help explain it
I'm happy to.
more to the board, and I think also to the general public, so if you can dig that up, even if it's a slide or two,
Yep. I actually have a hard copy sitting right there on my desk.
Okay.
I'm happy to send it to you.
So I have a question. So the vendor that we're using, you said is the National Joint Power Alliance. It's a type of cooperative vendor, and they basically purchase furniture from several different manufacturers. So you get a full blend of manufacturers in this offering, and that's the beauty of the program. So the vendor is really this cooperative group called National, and the state honors this as a valid way to do business based on my memory of the Odell discussion. So we could do through the state contract or do through this vendor, but as long as we're getting multiple manufacturers involved, then we don't have to.
Yeah, so I just want to clarify just one thing. And so there's a vendor and there's a contract, a national purchasing contract. And so
Okay.
this vendor and this vendor and this vendor can use the national purchasing contract. We have chose this vendor for this school, and we chose this vendor for this school, but they're both using the national purchasing contract.
So the margin's the same no matter what they do because they're using that purchasing contract.
We're protected, and so that's the idea, is it went through a bid process. We're getting the lowest possible price, and we're doing it all through one vendor, and we're having the bidding done for us.
My understanding at the time was that this arrangement was like a cooperative of some sort. Maybe it's not a phrase that I
That's
think
exactly
we-
it.
I don't think we've said that tonight, but that's my recollection from when we discussed the Odell furniture.
That is exactly
that
it.
it works to our advantage.
Cooperative construction purchasing agreement.
Gotcha, thank you.
So,
Okay, so board members, I just sent you those bullets to reference, and then Ms. Klutz will give us, Mr. Cohen will give us some additional details next week if necessary. Ms. Monroe, could I ask you to put these 3 FF&E items on the agenda just right in a row? Right now, we have one item in the middle, because that way we can go through votes pretty quick. So. I guess I don't want to do them in consent because we don't have the additional details tonight. So anytime there's more information.
Yeah, but can we not put them under one item with
Oh.
3 subs?
Mr. Shaw, can we do that? Put all 3?
it's 3 different schools, so,
Yeah, I would probably do them separately
Yeah.
just in case there's an issue.
and it's
Okay.
different companies as well, so.
Okay. Okay. So we've covered all 3 of yours right now because it's really the same information. If the board's good with that, then we'll only have one agenda item left tonight.
Okay, thank you.
We're good? Okay. So we'll ask Mr. Louder. you're on deck next for the Southwest Elementary School General Contractor.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and board members. We took our bids Friday a week ago, actually Thursday a week ago, and as all of you are aware, you've received your budget package. We were well over budget. We were, based on our award schedule, we actually went to the county ahead of you, but we apologize for that. It's just the way timing works out. But we were able to at least give the county the heads up so they could understand what the funding request may be. And fortunately for us, they did have that money built into their financing package to allow with enough money to cover the overage. But at this point in time, I need to actually explain to you, I guess, where we are on that overage situation. We came in about $4.6 million over the budget amount. We had very tight bids, had 5 bidders. Then we had also several alternates within the bid. Some were add alternates, some were deduct alternates. However, we looked through the packaging and we wanted to figure out how do we get to $4.6 million over budget. I was quoted in the paper saying it's all about the steel tariffs. Well, it did play a role in that, obviously. The futures market for steel, structural steel, and steel materials is very high. We saw almost a 30% advertised increase since January when our construction bid estimate went together. However, the futures are even higher than that. So, obviously they're looking to purchase things out 60 to 90 days out. You can only imagine their futures, what they were trying to guess and what their future pricing for metals would be. So the prices were rather high.
Mr. Louder, if I may, and I've shared this with him before this meeting, and I sent all the board members, Ms. Klutz or whomever did it, I think you did it, or Brian, added the percentage of increases in all the categories for construction. So it was not just the steel, it's across the board. I have to express my disappointment in that the estimate, which was done in the last few months, was not, and I'm not talking about our budget, but the estimate that we did not have forewarning by our architect and the construction team to get a heads up that we act surprised when the bids are open. We should have known that. We should have expected something.
I expected it.
Huh? Well, but I mean, we should have had something communicated to us. We really think the market's floating to here. And I don't like surprises. Not to this magnitude. This was a big difference. So somehow we need to get better at the estimating, knowing that these situations are occurring in the market.
And
So-
I was getting to where we were based on where we were in January. January 18th, 2018, that's when our construction estimate was done. Verified by several local contractors that our budget estimates were good at that time. 2
Yeah.
months ago, okay, 2 months ago.
2 months ago?
2.5, January 18th. From January 18th to March 18th, 2 months. So, within that 2 months time frame, even our contractors were caught off guard at how much the price increases were going to be. We even had 2 that said they almost did not turn their bids in because they saw how high the pricing was on several line items. They said it's not even, we're not going to be in the ballpark. We had to take this because they only had so many people, subs, bidding to them that we felt like we were wasting our time to turn the bid in. We saw that much increase in the last 3 weeks prior to bid. Now, I apologize that you couldn't get heads up, but we knew we were on the edge, but we did not realize how much those futures prices were going to affect the pricing from our subs. Okay? If you look at the breakdown that you got for budget comparison of all the increases above budget, the line items that where the majority of their cost and materials is metal related. Be structural steel, aluminum canopies, door fronts, door frames, steel studs. That accounts for 72.45% of the overage. So, saying that metals futures played a major role in our overage is a very accurate statement. Okay? The concrete prices, just concrete alone, line item, was another 20% of that overage due to concrete increases that just came into effect. So you can see how that may affect contractors' bid. Someone has said, well, you've got about $200,000 in general conditions. General conditions are about 3 to 4%, usually 3.5 to 4%. 3.8% is what it worked out to be average. 3.8% was general conditions. Well, if you raise your bid price by $4 million, multiply it times 4%, you get 1.7 million, $170,000, $180,000. So you can see where that $200,000 came from as well. The contractors obviously doing their general conditions to cover the extra amount of contract. So that's kind of where the breakdown falls. We apologize for the overage, but don't have a whole lot of control over it.
I think as smart as y'all are, we wouldn't expect you to understand international economics or speculation of what folk around the world say that causes the price of these commodities, I guess, is what you might call them, to fluctuate so wildly in a short period of time.
Yes,
And as I recall from the construction committee meetings, there was a lot of certainty about those prices at that time.
Yes, sir.
And in the meantime, people have had international conversations that resulted in where we are today.
Well, and we do understand, we can understand why. We're just very unlucky to be in the timeline we are. We have also discussed, well, we would go back out maybe and go back out to redesign or do something and try to go back to the bid market. And looking at the overall bid picture in our region, there are 9 projects going out for bid in the next 60 days in our region. We felt like the best we could do is come back to you probably within 60 days with another package to go out. Now we're behind that curve. So even the general contractors that are on the market today will probably not be available 60 days from now because there's 9 other projects that's hit the street that will be of similar size and scope of ours. So we feel like that really will probably end up buying less building for probably more money 60 days down the road just because the market will tighten even more. Now maybe the futures will come down. We might could benefit from that, but I don't think the futures are going to relax that much in the next 60 days to cause them to cut their prices 20% or 25% like they raised them prior to this bid.
What are the opportunities for value engineering in here?
There are some. There's obviously not $4 million. Brian and I have discussed this at length with the architect. We went to the high school project. We were able to value engineer about $950,000 out of that project, but that was a $65 million project. That's quite a difference than $29 million. So, we may see $400,000 to $500,000. Again, we were going to really quite reduce a lot of the things within the school to do that.
How many students again for this?
940 students. I was asked that by the county commission, what if I made it smaller? Well, the area we're putting this high school, or this elementary school, you realize is a very, very high growth area. That's why it's going there to start with. We feel like we'll probably open this school with a population of 750. So, to reduce it by a couple hundred may only save us, $2 or $3 million off the cost because the infrastructure will still be the same. And then within 2 years, we'll be at full capacity the day we open. So I'm not sure that really makes a lot of sense to try to do something like that as well.
Well, without reducing capacity, what are opportunities for value engineering?
We can take some of the materials out of the building itself. We can reduce some of the canopies and that sort of thing, and some of the we have some canopy structures that allow you to say this identifies this as the entrance to the building. Those obviously can go away. Will have to go away. We wanted to do something with the. We looked at doing some add-ons like the sunshades and stuff like that. However, we haven't found those to be very effective. We built them onto the last couple of schools we built, and they're a great idea of bouncing the light back up into the room. But we still have teachers that close the blinds most of the day. So that kind of just, a $20 blind pretty much, counteracts a $600 exterior sunshade. So it's kind of like, okay, we really want to spend the money on those type of things. So obviously.
Okay, well, that's already not highlighted on the ad alternates.
Yeah, but
so that's not a value
item.
item.
But The other area, maybe the tile materials, we may have to drop back to a different type of tile material. Right now, we have a very low-maintenance rubberized tile material. It's about 50% higher than a regular VCT. However, it's cheaper up front by 50%, but we're going to pay it on waxing. Probably within 3 years, you pretty much have spent, but that's something we can do to get the price to the point where we can award it. Those are some of the things we can do. Obviously, we can look at the built-in with the cabinetry and that sort of thing, and start looking to see what kind of cabinet can we reduce. Can we change it over and buy it with movable furniture rather than built-in cabinetry? Those type of items we can look at in doing that as well. So, but we really...
Because one of the techniques I always remember is when we built Cox Mill High School, is we went to that polished concrete surface. So there are techniques, not necessarily a thing like a cabinet, but a technique that could be altered in construction that would be less expensive but provide the same value.
We've done quite a bit of that already. We've removed a lot of the clay tile floors in the bathrooms. We went with an epoxy floor system, which is cheaper and more economical to install. We have looked at doing, we've not really had a lot of success with the concrete, the grinding of the concrete. Especially in a two-story school, because the second story we're going to have cracks, and obviously that's an aesthetic thing. Structurally it's fine, but aesthetically it just doesn't look well. So we're really kind of reluctant to go back to that.
Well, could you, I guess, guys, work on a list with the architects perhaps and see what,
the best
where we can help ourselves? I'm thinking about we need to give the county commissioners something to say we're trying to help ourselves.
We will. Our best opportunity would be to accept a bid from one of our contractors and go back to them and say, what in your bid can we do to bring this price down? Because the architect can only make suggestions, but if the contractor doesn't agree, then it doesn't really matter. So from that standpoint, we would like to probably make a recommendation to you that you would accept one of our contractors so that we can go back and negotiate with that contractor before now in time for award.
Yeah. I also wanted to point out, just to confirm with you, I kind of know the answer, but I want to confirm with you, is that when we look at awarding a bid, we look at the total of the base bid and the alternates we choose to accept.
Yes, ma'am.
Historically. So, and that becomes the low bid, not the low base bid.
Yes, ma'am.
Because we've run across this multiple times, where if you take the base, it's one number. If board members, if you look at that, there's another contractor who is a little bit lower on the base, but when you do the add alternates that we choose, and that we had every intention of accepting, it comes out to a different person.
Yes, ma'am.
So, okay.
And that's kind of where we are on this one.
Yeah. And I know that's happened multiple times over the years, so.
And the bids are very, very tight, which is a sign that obviously your drawings and specifications were pretty good, because everyone saw it the same. If you see a very wide spread in those bids, a lot of times you think, well, maybe somebody missed something. They just didn't see something, or the drawings didn't explain what the methodology was. But in this case here, the bids were almost very similar. Of course, if you also look at the subcontractors list, subcontractors were almost the same on everyone. There were very few fluctuations. Almost everyone used almost the same subcontractors. Like you can imagine, their prices should be fairly close.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. It was just kind of a flip-flop of who was using which combinations.
Yeah. There were just a couple that were different, usually in mechanical and usually in the grading, were pretty much where you saw the difference. And I think it was masonry. I had two different contractors overall, but most of them were in the same contractors overall.
Yeah.
So you can imagine the prices would be, you would think they'd be similar if you came to do that. But with that being said, we would like to accept the zero alternates. That obviously those are the ones where we had preferred alternates for equipment and like Bosch equipment and like our train systems, our Medico lock systems, our Slade's lock sets, those kind of things. They were zero adds to accept the materials that we wish to have, which is a good thing. You would obviously want to accept those, right? We don't feel like at this time, though, with the budget we have, that we can take the glazed tile. And we just talked a minute bit about the sunshades. We just feel like that's just something that, whether it reduces our price or adds to our prices, it's just something we don't really feel like we need to do. They were put in order to meet a energy point system on our code, but we just don't feel like they're actually useful to us. we do have one that we do feel like is probably a valuable add to us, and that's the CPI daylighting system. We have a couple skylight systems in the school, and before we have used what we call a cow wall. That's this bi-panel system. It's cow wall, and it's just a fiberglass mesh between two panels that lets light come in. It filters the light. However, that cow wall, it gets dirty or it gets dark very, very quickly. We've had to actually go back and replace them because it just deteriorates significantly, allowing light to infuse. Where we have these skylights, we feel like that because it's in an interior quarter, we have wings going off in all directions. Our main interior quarter is 2 stories and doesn't let a lot of light in. Without that lights in there on a full-time basis, it's going to be very, very dark. And we were kind of put out a little bit during the design process that wasn't our main design. And I said, well, we'll just go back and add it as an alternate. But we felt like that was what we really wanted as our basis of design, not the other way around. But we do feel like we'd like to go ahead and accept that one, which is one of the add alternates. And the only one was the ductless splits, was a couple $1,000s. We felt like we could afford to add that one. And we do not wish to accept the deduct for the 5-year warranty because we felt like the deduct we get for 5 additional years, go from 5 to 10 years on all major components, is probably worth more than the deduct we would get for it. Okay? So that being said, with the alternates that we felt like we wish to accept or recommend to you as a board to accept, the base bid or the bid with alternates, Lightner Construction Company comes in at low bid at $29,537. $29,537,000.
537?
637, I'm sorry. And China Construction comes in at $29,650,000. It's only $13,000 differential, but it does flip the order of those bids on bid day.
What are the numbers of these bid alternates that you're accepting?
The highlighted ones.
Basically, all the
That's
bid
all he
alternates are
said.
0. We do not accept the one for
So
100,000.
So number 2, number 3,
No, we're not taking number 2 either.
you're not taking number 2. Okay, so number 3.
But what's the highlights? I'm sorry. I thought
Well,
those were
the highlights were the original, when we went with the first architect, we went through with the very first one with the architect, that was one they offered up to us. Brian and I have discussed it, and we feel like that's not, we don't want to take number 2. We are
Okay,
taking
how do
number
we
3.
read this then? Oh, because you have the numbers down below.
Yes, ma'am.
It says total of alternates 2, 3, and then 5 to 13.
Yes.
Those are the highlighted ones.
Yeah, but you
We're
said
taking the
2.
zeros, we're taking all the ones that, we're taking, check them off if you will, please. Recommending we take number 3. Okay?
Number 2.
No, we're not
No,
going
we
to take
didn't
number
say
2. If we're not going to put the sunshades in, we don't want to pay for putting
Okay,
in a
I
space
think
to mount them later.
The pages, the information needs to be updated then.
Yes, ma'am.
Because it refers to, number 2 is highlighted, and number 2 is referenced below,
Yes, ma'am.
even though it's 0 for
Yes.
Lightner, but
Yes, ma'am. HVAC number 3, it's a 0 all the way through. We're not accepting number 4. Number 5 is Bosch. You know, we preferred alternate. You folks voted for us a couple years back, allow that to be our preferred alternate for Bosch. Von Duplan exit door devices. We've accepted number 6. We've accepted that one. Number 7, the LCN door closers. That's 0 alternate. Accept that one. Number 8, Medico lock cores. Obviously, Medico was our standard for all of our safety locks. Number 8, sledge lock sets. That's a 0. It's number 9.
Number 9.
Number
Okay.
10 is glazed wall tile. We'd love to have glazed wall tile, but that's a add alternate. You're adding to the price instead of going the other way.
So you taking it or not?
We're not going to take it.
We're not going to take number.
Not going to take it.
10.
Number 9 is the ductless splits. It's a small add, but we feel like it's something we feel like we need to do. That they need to have those splits.
Yep.
Then the Bosch access control system. Obviously, if we have Bosch alarm system, we'd like to have the access control system for the motion detection. So we want to add that one. And then the CPI daylighting, again, I just explained to you why it was very necessary. We actually have the clear glass, or the clear fiberglass, rather than the mesh panels that we've used previously.
okay, would you please get this chart updated and get it back to us, like in the next day or 2?
Yeah, I'll have it for you tomorrow morning.
Okay, because it's confusing and
Yes.
because we don't get it in Excel, I'm not going to sit here and add things up, but I
Sure.
think we need to get these numbers lined up.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
Have we worked with
Yeah.
this company before?
Which one, ma'am?
Have we, it's not working. There we go. Have we worked with this company before?
Which one, ma'am?
We have not.
Which one? I'm
The
sorry.
one that we
Oh,
recommended.
Leitner. Yes, ma'am, we have. They just finished Mount Pleasant Middle School.
Have we had good,
They built that school in 14 months for us.
huh?
They built that school in 14 months for us, so we felt pretty good about that, yes.
Oh, okay, okay. And where are they? Are they out of Charlotte?
No, ma'am, they're out of South Carolina.
South Carolina, okay.
Rock
Okay.
Hill, actually.
And can I ask maybe a financial question about the estimated North Carolina sales tax? The line on the second page, there's a range of anywhere from 150,000 to 1,000,001. How does that work? And I'm asking how we would factor that in. I'm thinking of sales tax refund. Am I misunderstanding something?
Right, I had to ask Brian, and Brian did get, there was the document with the comparison, and I had that removed from that document. I didn't realize it was on this document also.
Okay.
That needs to be removed from here.
So just don't factor that in. That's,
It's just because of the way that the county funds us, and they take the sales tax refund on construction and use that for debt and other things, so we don't get the advantage of that.
gotcha.
So that's why I'm saying.
So it's not like we would put that back in fund balance or something?
We do not, that's just not
Per
something
se.
that we should
It's a
look at.
thing straight to the county.
So it's really not anything for us to consider.
Yeah.
It's
Thank you.
Already added in
Yeah.
final bid price.
Thank you.
It's just for information purposes.
So other questions, Dr. Kirk?
Did I understand the county already has this information?
Please turn your mic on.
I'm sorry. I thought I had it on. Turn it off. Kelly has done that. Yes, sir. We had to, in order to meet our construction schedule and to meet y'all haven't they pushed theirs to Tuesday, you pushed yours a week later. We both would have met on the same night otherwise. We should have been both on Monday night. But yes, sir, we took it to the county as a heads up to make sure that from a budget standpoint, they knew the prices came in over budget and to get their input as to whether or not they could cover that. And of course, they were, and Miss Susan Farrington was there, and she said they had built that into the package, even though it would cost more debt service payments, but they had money, they had room within the borrowing capacity with this next to cover that for $4.5 million. So we've got to do some BE to get back to that.
Mr. Louder, I have some questions.
Yes, sir.
All right, when I look at these alternates, the one thing that jumps out at me is, in alternate number 1, you said that we weren't going to consider that. However, for this one China Construction, there's a no bid on that, so that means that they folded that into the cost of their project. But then, of course, then they put in there $14,000 in line item 2, $14,500 to cover some center sets on the 403 storefront. So I have a feeling I don't know if that has anything to do with these sunshades. But did you just say we eliminated number 2 from the consideration?
Yes, sir. If we don't do
So if we
sunshades
don't-
at all, we don't.
So if we don't do the sunshades, we don't need number 2?
No, number 2 was to be, if you didn't do the sunshades and you felt like someday you might want to come back and put them in, you would do number 2 to be able to have places to mount them.
Well, if you change that number, then that changes the sum or of this and actually makes them the low bidder versus Leitner. Huh? You took out number 10? I thought you just said you weren't going to take out number 10.
No, we are. We had to.
Or now you're going to
We
take
can't.
out
It's a
number 10.
$100,000 ad, sir. We just don't feel like we can add that much more to the budget.
So that's
So
what-
this is like within $2,000.
It is.
By the time you take the 14.5 out and then you take out number 10, we're like, this is a real horse race right here.
Yes, sir, it is.
So we need the totals. If you would please send us the Excel file, not a PDF, so we can do our own totals.
Okay. Do that.
But what you need from us to present to the commissioners is a number. Is that correct? Or is it the final number?
I don't need the final number until next week.
What do you need from us
I need
on
from-
this? Because I got an understanding there was two pieces that you needed. One was,
What I need for you tonight is permission to negotiate with the apparent low bidder with the alternates we've picked to allow us to come to a final number that you could be presented with next week. Then we can take to the county commissioners the following week for final approval.
I don't think we can do that with not having an accurate sheet in front of us. I personally can't.
I agree, yeah. It's too close now, that the numbers are so close now that I don't really know who is the true bona fide lowest bid.
Board members? Yeah, I think we need to wait until next week and get the final sheet with what we are accepting.
Unless they can send us something this week. I mean, give us a total this week sometime.
Yeah, but we still can't, won't be able to vote. So is 5 business days going to make that much of a difference?
Yes, ma'am. Significant.
But we need the,
I understand.
there's too much question. And it does change the outcome.
Yes, because if we don't,
So can you talk about what that does mean? Or you're saying that 5 days make a difference? What difference does it make?
in order for the county to go sell their bonds beginning in May, they have to have a final number by the 23rd, which is their board meeting. So if we cannot give them a final request by that date, then they have no number to take to that bond.
We can give them a final number on the 16th.
Well,
Not if I cannot negotiate with a contract between them.
I'm sorry. And what, Ms. Carpenter, what?
Well, somebody sit down with the calculator right now and add it up.
Well, we would need to recess, they would need to go create a new spreadsheet for us.
Madam Chair, I may recommend that we take a 10-minute recess.
If we need this number now, let's get it now.
Well, just hold on, let's see how fast can they get this straight? Who has the original document?
So the original
I
document,
think we
the
need
original document is a
paper in front of us,
PDF
not
document,
verbals.
and I think I can export it as an Excel file, then I'll have to walk over to my office and do that. If you want me to, 15? Yeah, I mean, I can go try.
Yeah, Mr. Hughes is
It may
here.
not be as pretty, but
Mr. Hughes is here. Do you have the original file with you by chance?
I do not, but I can call the office.
Can we take a 10-minute recess?
15?
Can we take a 20-minute recess?
Okay.
Yes.
We will, Ms. Stroud, we need to vote to recess? We can just, huh?
Make a motion, we take a 20-minute recess.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the board is recessed for 20 minutes until 8:30 PM. Good evening. The Board of Education has come back from the recess with the additional information we had requested from staff. So we'll continue on the agenda item 8.05 with the Southwest Elementary School General Contractor Approval. First of all, board members, you have the information in front of you, and I believe it's being shown on the screen as well. Is that correct, Michael?
Yes.
Okay. So the items are more clear now. I will tell you, Ms. Klutz has just updated, and we're not going to get a new file right now, on row 30 where it says total of alternates and the numbers are just listed, the number of the alternate. She'll update that and get Ms. Monroe a new file. So we can see with the correct items that are highlighted now, those are the alternates we're choosing. Is that correct, Mr. Louder?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you want to tell us, everything is the way you were verbally describing, it
Yes,
just totaled. So, board members, any questions on what you're seeing on the updated sheet?
No questions, ma'am.
Mr. Harrison?
Nothing that would
Okay. Mr. Shoemaker?
Tim, I hate to ask this question, but I'm going to have to. On the China bid, there is a no bid. So it's in their scope for the sunshades. Everybody else put money in their scope for sunshades, but they didn't. So there's actually a potential deduct on theirs for sunshades, since that was in their base bid, because it was a $0 amount along with all the other $0. Do you see it that way?
If I go to value engineering and say I don't want to use that item, what it tells me is I get zero money back.
It tells you get zero money back.
The way I was, for being in the contract business myself, it appears to me that they were hedging their bet that we would not take alternate 1. They put the money in alternate number 2, saying I'll put it in the frame so that you can put them in the future, because they knew it was going to be a high bid. But I guess we could force the hand and take it and make them put it in. Probably wouldn't like that, but it could. But then again, they're on the building, they're a maintenance issue for us forever.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
They're on the bid, they're on the building, and we have to deal with them for forever. So that's just something we can do. I'm not a fan of them, personally. Okay? I just don't think they work.
The sunshade.
Yes, sir. I'm just not a fan. We have them in Mount Pleasant. They really don't work. You walk in that room and you can close the shade, you can open the shade, and there's no difference in light levels. It just doesn't really work. It doesn't work the way they tell you they will. Now, maybe if we had higher ceilings or more open, maybe they would, but by putting in that very closed, tight drop ceiling, it just doesn't have room, I guess, to react and reflect the way it should. So if you're more than 10 feet away from the building room, it doesn't really, I guess it was designed to be much lower and push way back into the room and then bounce down. But the way our buildings are, our ceilings are such limited, I don't think we get that effect.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Powell, any questions?
No, ma'am.
Mr. Walter?
Okay, explain to us again why you need a vote today, why can't it wait till Monday?
I don't need a vote to accept the contract today. All I need is authorization from the board to be able to begin negotiations with the low bidder.
And
As
negotiations
presented.
for what?
For value engineering to try to get us below the budget that the county will let us accept.
But you just told us we're not going to come anywhere close to the 4 million.
No. They tell us we got $4.5 million more available to us.
Okay.
So I've got to get below that number to get us in where they can borrow the money for it.
Okay.
It may be 500, 600, whatever, but that would give us below that 4.5.
All right, thank you.
No, so basically, we're just asking to try to value engineering, you're not asking us to approve this amount.
No, ma'am. That amount hopefully is going to be lower.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, I move that we go ahead and, I move that we allow our staff to go ahead and start value engineering this puppy and try to get the numbers down.
Okay, and I'm wondering, how will that be different if he starts negotiation and we have not approved it yet? How is that different than us just approving it tonight? Mr. Shaw?
Well, the statute says you can negotiate. Thank you. Statute says you can negotiate with the lowest responsible bidder. And then you can try to, that's if the bids are in excess of what you have. And that's our situation. So they want authorization to go ahead with the lowest responsible bidder. But, you know, that, the lowest responsible bidder depends on which options are included.
Right.
Right, because if you looked at the base bid, then China was the lowest responsible bidder. But if you look with these options, then Leitner, I think, is the lowest responsible bidder by what?
Right, and I'm not questioning
13,000.
that, because this is historical. We've always included the ad alternates
Oh,
with the
I think,
base bid.
I think that's appropriate.
Yeah.
But the question is, to me, which of those options do you include and do you not include?
Well, they've highlighted, so my question is not
Right.
about who to award it to. I'm saying, should we just go ahead and vote tonight to award the bid before they start negotiations?
No,
or do
I
we-
wouldn't award the bid.
Okay, so let them go talk to
Yeah.
them and see what they can come in with.
Mhm.
And are we looking at the right spreadsheet because Ms. Klutz just sent?
Just with that one correction on the left. Yeah. It was just like a title correction. Yeah.
What I would do on the motion, I would identify, if it's understood that Leitner is considered the lowest responsible bidder, then I think the motion should identify that, go ahead and negotiate with Leitner Construction as the apparent lowest responsible
Okay.
bidder.
Dr. Kirk, before we get a second, would you like to just name them in your bid, in your motion, sorry? Not your bid.
Either do it that way or you can identify the alternates, but the options, because I think one way or the other, we have to identify why is it that Leitner is being selected.
What's going in minutes?
If you show Leitner, that's fine, because we've had the discussion on these options. Or we can identify, including options, whatever they were.
3, 5 to 13.
3, 5, 13, lowest responsible bidder.
Oh, wait, no, actually.
Including
missing 9,
options,
missing
blank,
10.
blank, blank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Madam Chair, then I move that we ask the staff to go back and start negotiating to include the alternates 3, 5 through 9, 11 through 13 for a lower price.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Harrison seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so you have the board's approval to go negotiate, but it's not awarding the contract yet.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Anything else you need from us tonight? That was enough. And we've already covered Mr. Cohn's remaining items. They'll be consolidated or put in the order. So at long last, Mr. Cohn, anything else? No, because it was all kind of the same subject. Huh?
Is it consent or action? The furniture contracts?
Oh, it'll be action.
Action, okay.
Because we need those details. Yeah, yeah. So if there's no other business, board members, I'll call for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Okay, Ms. Carpenter made the motion. Mr. Shoemaker seconded the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you all, and thank you to those who have stuck with us tonight and to our viewing audience. Have a good evening.